more quick.
I gotta land 4 wheels or not.
One more quick one. I slammed into the wall anyways. That looked pretty clean.
It was better than all the other ones though.
So I know it's not like officially at Wallenberg, but I think that my favorite clip filmed here is probably that last line that Josh Kalis does in Toy Machine's Heavy Metal, where he does a 360 flip over this little sidewalk garden gap here. Then he pushes down the sidewalk. He does a kickflip over another little grass gap, and then a quick-footed backside 180 into the driveway, then pops over a little gap back onto the sidewalk. And what's cool about that clip is that, one, it's directly across the street from Wallenberg, but two, it's both typical and atypical of San Francisco neighborhoods. Most neighborhoods that were built earlier in the 20th century, or even in the 19th century, don't have these little grass sidewalk gaps. And most houses and buildings in San Francisco don't look like these buildings that are in Anza Vista, which is where Wallenberg is. But the reason why this whole neighborhood looks the way that it does and why it happens to be as skatable as it is because all of this was built in the late 1940s when they cleared this land of what it had been before, which was the biggest Catholic cemetery in the city of San Francisco. And they built Wallenberg High School, which was originally Anza Vista Elementary, a Sears, a Kaiser Hospital, and this Insta neighborhood of post-war housing, which to me was like an attempt to like bring or keep people from moving to the suburbs. And so that's in a weird way why Wallenberg is such an amazing spot, is that it's very much like an anti-urban schoolyard. You have a giant asphalt slab with almost no trees, which, you know, in the mid-20th century seemed like a good idea. Why wouldn't kids want to play on this like baking hot asphalt ground? You have this like terrace set of wide steps that lead up the natural hillside of this former cemetery. And then you have this school that's ultra modern, floating horizontal planes that are connected by these brick bases and walls with these wide strip windows, which is supposed to be like a modern schoolhouse. If you think about how old schoolhouses look before the Second World War, they look like castles, they look like mansions or something like that. They were brick, they were historical. This is not one of these schoolhouses. This is about like efficiency, industry, clarity, openness. And to some extent, that even determines the way that the schoolyard is designed. So the architects of Wallenberg are this design firm called Hertzka and Knowles, and they actually designed those quarter pipes at 24th Street Missions. And in a weird way, this school connects to their work there because one, you have like a brick base for this school, which you can see like on the side of the building, and those curving brick walls on the upper deck of Wallenberg were also designed by Hertzka and Knowles as like little benches and partitions. And even like the curbs, ledges, and the gap itself has these rounded corners as they rise up the hill. The style of the schoolyard is probably called like streamlined modern. In other words, it's a very modern, simplified, elegant approach to designing a schoolyard. If you think about like benches themselves or these ledges, like prior to World War II, there weren't concrete ledges being built. If you had benches for people to sit on, they were either stone or wood. They had ends, they had backs. These concrete ledges that they poured here around 1952 are probably some of the oldest concrete ledges that people skate today, which I think is pretty amazing. I mentioned that there was a Sears that was built and opened up in 1952 on the corner of Geary and Masonic. If you look at old footage of like Javante or Rick Ibiceta skating this cool like white painted double-sided concrete ledge, that was the ledge that separated the parking lot of that Sears from the sidewalk. And so you can imagine that like skaters that were like taking the 38 bus going up Geary, they'd see this intersection where you had these like amazing spots. If you're coming up here from Sears or wherever, Wallenberg offers everything you might want to skate if you're a street skater. There's a little low curb at the base of the steps. There's a 3-stair high ledge if you can ollie up that one curb. There's like gaps from the 2, the 3, or the 4 if you want to go crazy. And then at the top of the ledges and on the upper part of the school, there's these 2 thermoplastic steel picnic tables that you can either skate the benches or the top of if you have pop. On the upper yard, you had the same open flat ground, no ledges, but you had these like low brick walls that curved around the perimeter of the asphalt schoolyard that people could like nose bonk in the late 80s and early 90s, but very quickly started doing flip tricks over. I think of like Mike Carroll's part in the first FTC video as the first real sustained sessions happening at this spot. But that was the whole thing, because you saw like your favorite skaters doing the best looking tricks in the best way possible at this spot. That raised the standard for skateboarding as a whole across the world. They also had, of course, a bump over a rail next to a portable schoolhouse. That's where like Jason Lee ollies a bump over the rail and then, you know, does like the best fakie 360 flip in the history of fakie 360 flips. And it just meant that like the level of skating like was raised. If you're popping your tricks over brick walls and you're doing ledge tricks on the top of tables and not like LA schoolyard tables, it just meant that this was a much more like heavy spot. I didn't grow up skating in San Francisco. I am not a San Francisco style skater. But if you've not been to San Francisco, let me just warn you that everything that you see is 1,000 times harder to skate here. Whereas if you go to places like New York or LA or like Barcelona, most of the famous spots are a lot easier. In 1990, 1991 video days, Gon set it off, showing how you could not only like grab it, but also slam while skating this gap. Like Jesse Paez frontside 180'd it after Back to the City in 1992. And then on his North American killing spree, Diego Bucherri backside 180's it in 1998. Let's acknowledge that Frank Gerwer bombed Vega in order to get speed for this for a kickflip. I mean, look at this thing, it's massive. Tony Manfree, switch ollie. And I think like once you had like those tricks done, anything was possible if you just had the speed and the time.
Okay, is it gonna be a dud? And then Alyssa, of all people, Alyssa, I love you, kid. She fucking went for it. Alyssa went for it like fucking 4 times. She stacked so fucking hard, I was like, oh God, that's money.
There are definitely bigger gaps, but there aren't older gaps. There aren't gaps that people have continually skated, and there aren't gaps that continue to matter in the same way that Wallenberg does. I mean, sure, you have your Carlsbads and you have like Love Park, but those gaps are gone now. But I think that one of the reasons why this is such a popular skate spot in San Francisco is not only because it's a unique schoolyard, unlike the rest of the city, but also just because of the way that the rest of the school is kind of tucked into the hillside, which means that the people working at the school who don't want you to skate there can't necessarily see you doing the thing that they don't want you to do while you're skating here. And I think it's the fact that San Francisco was the absolute center of the universe when people were skating this school. And the way that people skated this school meant that this otherwise newly built, rapidly aging, somewhat insignificant schoolyard became the absolute epicenter of skateboarding for a few years in the mid-90s. Don't forget, we're talking about a school and an entire neighborhood that's built on a former cemetery. There are probably corpses under the ground here. As I said before, the gap isn't getting any smaller. I think that's one of the important things about this spot is that it has this like lore to it and it's still skatable. Luckily, despite the fact that like so many extra concrete ramps were built here, you still have a decent enough like run up to the original gap itself, which means that you can have contest series here and you can pull the roll-in ramp out if someone comes here claiming a fakie flip or something. This is still one of those places where every trick hasn't been done because doing any trick down this gap is fucking insane. Great skate spots survive by their potential. And this is one of these great skate spots that's sustained by the potential of things that not only have been done, but have not yet been done.